Well, good morning and welcome, everyone. Jim Brett here at the New England Council. Hope everyone had a great Labor Day weekend. It truly is hard to believe that September is already here. But I am pleased to report that we're looking forward to a very busy fall at the New England Council. I wanted to take a few minutes just to tell you about some of the exciting programming we have planned in the next couple of weeks. On September 14th, we look forward to our annual program with Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker. Later that week, on September 16th, we'll be hosting the Capitol Hill Report New York Congressman John Katko. And of course, we're gearing up for our virtual 2021 annual celebration, when we will celebrate an all-female lineup of New Englanders of the Year for the first time in the history of the award. The program will be presented on October 18th, and there are still opportunities to sponsor the event if you haven't already. Today, we are very excited to be kicking off a new virtual event series called Inside the Corner Office. We plan to bring these programs to you monthly, and each one will feature a leader, whether it's a CEO, a president, or an executive director of a New England Council member or an organization. And our goal in presenting these programs is to give our members the opportunity to learn from these leaders about their own career paths and approaches to leadership, as well as the key initiatives and challenges their organization is tackling. And of course, given the council's focus on federal policy, we'll also be talking with our guests about their own policy priorities and how our leaders in Washington, D.C. can help foster continued economic growth here in the region. Our guest for today's inaugural program is Tom Bartlett, the CEO of American Tower Corporation. Headquarters here in Boston, American Tower is a leading independent owner, operator, and developer of multi-tenant communications real estate, with a portfolio of over 214,000 communication sites around the globe. In other words, when you drive around and see cell towers dotting the skyline, there's a pretty good chance they are owned and operated by American Tower. Tom assumed the leadership of the company in March 2020, after serving as the executive vice president and CFO for over a decade. We are so pleased that Tom could join us today, and I'm looking forward to talking with him about his own background and approach to leadership, and some of the key issues he and his team at American Tower are working on, including closing the digital divide and some of the key federal policy issues he's keeping tabs on. There's much to discuss, so let's dive in. As I mentioned, most of our audience today drives by American Tower infrastructure every day, but they may not have a very clear picture of your business and the leadership role you play in your industry. So why don't we start with an introduction to American Tower, Tom?
No, thanks, Jim, and thank you absolutely for having me here today. I mean, the work that you've done and the council has done over the last decades is remarkable. And as I mentioned to you right up front, I should be doing this interview with you, given the success that you've had in your leadership style. So I'm sure that's in the future, that it's going to get turned around somehow. But thank you again for sponsoring this and having American Tower participate in this a really, really important event. As you mentioned right up front, we are a technology-driven real estate company. Generally, American Tower is not a household name. People aren't talking about American Tower over dinner. But when you think about the amount of devices and the activity that you're using on your cellular phones, your iPads, there's a good chance that that's running through one of our pieces of real estate, not just here in the United States, but also around the world. So as you said, we have 220,000 or so of those beautiful cellular telephone tower structures. One of them is right behind me. And so they all look like that generally in the 23, 24 markets that we're serving. And we enable the large wireless carriers around the world to be able to, in essence, get a signal out to each of their customers. So our customers are like Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile here in the United States, Dish, who is just now launching service in the United States, Vodafone, Airtel, Telefonica, MTN on a more global basis. So our customers are generally very large corporate wireless players in the markets that they have. We do have roughly 2,000 to 3,000 customers on a global basis, but the large companies that I just manage probably represent about 95% of our revenue stream across the board. We have roughly 6,000 employees. We'll do almost about $10 billion in revenue this year. But we are like if you think of the tower behind me, we're kind of like a very tall building. We lease our space out to these large players to allow them to place their equipment, antennas, radios, fiber, all the things that go into making up what they need to be able to deliver service out to their customers. So it's a passive role that we're playing today. We'll build the 150-foot structure, and then everything else that happens at the site is really from what our customers are doing in terms of leasing up space under long-term leasing arrangements. So in the tower behind me, you can see really roughly 4 platforms on that tower, and each one of those platforms represents a different customer. So AT&T may have a platform, Verizon may be renting a platform, T-Mobile may be representing a platform, and Dish would have a platform. And our customers are renting space on those facilities. It's a monthly rental that they're paying us, again, over roughly a 10-year period. That's generally the length of the leasing arrangements, to enable them to be able to communicate with their customers. And so what's interesting about the technology element of a technology-driven real estate company, and we are a REIT, a real estate investment trust. We're one of the largest REITs in the globe, if you will. But as you and I and all of our fellow consumers continually use more and more of this wireless service, as we are, it's growing roughly 30% a year, which is kind of interesting. Our customers have to continually invest in their networks. And what that means is that they continually need to add radios and antennas to the platforms that they have on our towers to be able to meet the network and quality needs of their customers. So interestingly enough, if you think about the usage of your own device on your own basis, say 3 or 4 years ago, it's roughly 4 to 5 times higher now. And experts are forecasting that it's going to be another 4 or 5 times more wireless usage over the next 3 to 5 years. So this wireless stuff is really caught on. And just from your own personal usage, you can get a good sense of just how much you're using of it. And technology is really one of the enablers, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, over the next hour or so. But technology is really one of the enablers that's really promoting more and more wireless usage at the consumer level. So that's the business model.
Mm-hmm. You know, you're not new to American Tower, and certainly not new to the telecommunication industry, but you've only been in that role as the chief executive officer for like a year and a half. Tell us about this early period as being the CEO, given the many defining events that have occurred in the last year.
Well, as you mentioned right up front, I assumed this role back in March of last year, and it was about 2 days before the spring season closed down, the NBA closed its season, and the world really turned on its back. And so when I think back to the last 18 months, there are probably 4 or 5 major events that I've been spending much of my time on, candidly, Jim. The pandemic has to be the number one issue that we've all been dealing with, and keeping our people safe, keeping them engaged, keeping them, ensuring that they have a purpose and that they are feeling a purpose, because as people are more and more isolated, you can get less engaged from the core of what we're trying to do. And so there has been obviously a huge effort within the business to make sure that first people are safe, their families are safe, that they're able to work from home in a comfortable setting, and then just the ongoing communications, the personal communications with each employee to make sure that they are engaged, because we still have a business to run. And so, managing this kind of an environment, by the way, in 23 countries. So when we start to think about, the impacts in Boston with COVID and the pandemic, think about how different they are in South Africa or in India or in Brazil. And so we've learned a lot from each of the markets in terms of the experiences that people have, but they're all different. And so it's been an incredible experience, and it's a journey, and the evolution of the journey, thinking that, okay, maybe we're through all of the pandemic, and then realizing that, well, maybe we're not all through the pandemic. And then actually thinking through, okay, once we are through the pandemic, what does the world look like? And what do our offices look like? What are our people expecting? How are people going to be embracing that whole experience of coming back to work, and how does that impact their own lifestyles? And so there's a huge effort within our business, as there are every business, and we're working very closely with a number of companies right in New England, because we realize that we're not just the only ones thinking about this. And so there's an awful lot of learning that's going on across, the spread of companies. Also, right when I took over, George Floyd was murdered. And as you well know, that also turned the world, the United States in particular, on its back in terms of doing an awful lot of reflection on what does this mean, and not just what does this mean for our business, what does this mean personally. And so at that time, I spent an awful lot of time just internally thinking that through, and then embarking on trying to understand what the impact was and where we are as a business on that whole journey. I mean, our whole mantra is to make sure that people feel safe, to make sure that they feel a sense of belonging, that there is equity within our business. And it was at that time, candidly, Jim, when I realized that I'm not looking through all the right lenses, and so I needed help. And so that was part of the kind of the self-reflection that I went through. And I actually hired a coach, a wonderful woman right in Boston, who really helped me start to think through the process of being able to kind of address this whole area. And I started just listening to employees. I went on a listening tour. And so every day I was listening to another 25 employees just talk about their experiences. Many of those conversations, there were tears in people's eyes, but as a result of that experience, I expanded the number of lenses that I was looking through. And it really helped me kind of get my arms around, okay, where am I personally? Where are we as a board? Where are we as a business on that whole journey? And it is a journey. I'd say that the next major area is our business in terms of growth. I mean, over the last 12 months, we've probably done upwards of $15 billion of M&A. And so we've been very busy, in terms of creating even more scale within our business. And so we did a significant transaction in Europe, really put us on the map in Europe. We've just closed that over the last couple of months. And we also did a large transaction in the United States. And so, we continue to look at opportunities for our own business to be able to grow and expand, to be able to create even a more global type of business. And Europe happened to be an area, a geography where we didn't have significant presence. And so that's why we were so excited to be able to close the transaction in Europe. And then I guess, and you kind of hit it on your opening comments, we're trying to kind of address this overall, digital divide opportunity for us and around the world. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but half the world is in poverty, half of the world doesn't have an internet connection. Guess what? They're related. And we have found that when we can put a site like this in a community, in a village that doesn't have any kind of connectivity, we can absolutely change the direction and the economics and the lifestyle of people in that community. Whether it's telehealth, whether it's education, whether it's just selling their goods and services on a broader scale. It's incredible what we can do. And so we're working with a number of other organizations, the World Economic Forum, the BRT, a number of groups on a global basis to really finally kind of tackle this particular issue. And by the way, it's not just global, it's right here in the United States too. And that's what the infra bill is. And I know we'll talk a little bit about that, what that's geared toward. So it's the whole area that an event of really kind of advancing connectivity for those that don't have it is probably the other major area, if you will, that we. And as I said before, it's also meeting our customers' needs. We're in a period of time where new technology, new spectrum, which are the airwaves in terms of how the signal actually gets from the tower to our device, it's being deployed on a global basis. And so interestingly enough, also given the fact that we're all working from home, we're using more wireless, we're using more broadband. And so our customers are very active in terms of adding more infrastructure and renting more space. And so we're right at the center of that and need to make sure that they're able to do that and able to do that seamlessly. And so that's also been clearly a major effort over the last 18 months for us.
You mentioned that when you assumed the position, you did a lot of listening. And I'm reminded of Tim Ryan, PwC. He says the best leaders are the ones who listen and process and listen and process. So obviously you're doing that. But I have a two-part question that I know that people really would like to know more about you. And that is, how did you get where you are today? And what contributed to the leader that you are today? And can you talk a bit about how the definition of good leadership has evolved over the course of your career?
Well, thanks for that question, Jim. By the way, I spent a lot of time with Tim. We do a lot of listening with each other, and Tim's a great leader in the region in terms of pulling people together and really thinking through these types of issues on a broad basis. So I really enjoy working with him. As you think about leadership and style, I haven't found many people who are born leaders. It's people always talk about, oh, he's a born leader. I'm not sure I really buy into that. I think leadership style and qualities are a function of events, people that you meet, people that are mentoring you, your own experiences over time. And, I've been in business for 35, 40 years. So I've had a lot of time to develop, if you will. And I've been fortunate in that I've had some really interesting experiences. Before American Tower, I worked for Verizon for 25 years. And I had a number of very global roles, global business roles. which have absolutely helped formulate my thoughts and approaches to managing a global business. And that's provided a great platform for me. Even the 10 years that I spent as the CFO at American Tower, that's helped. It's given me credibility, it's given me experience, and it's created a platform for leadership. And as I said, I've also been very fortunate for having some great mentors. And, and my advice to my own kids, as well as people in our business, people that, find mentors, find people that you really respect, that are going to be, great role models for you, and then turn around and then be great mentors for others. And so I definitely think that that's part of the process of creating leadership. I mean, leadership is, if you think about it, it's kind of like a muscle. It needs toning, it needs work. And on my body, it needs a lot of work. And so you need that constant. Every day is a school day. Every day you're processing, like Tim was saying, listening, processing, and developing your own style. So it's definitely a function of experiences, I think, which kind of really create that platform for being a leader and having that credibility. But there are a few, kind of thinking, there are a few, I think, fundamental elements of leadership that are very important, and ones that I continue to work on every day. Selflessness, being humble, showing humility, I think is a great element of leadership. It's recognizing that, as my example before, I'm not looking through every lens that I need to look through, and so I need to recognize the fact that there's an awful lot of experiences that I haven't had. And so I need to be able to open up and be humble and ask and listen for those types of experiences, and to have that kind of an impact on my own style. Compassion, I'm not saying being a pushover, but being really compassionate, kindness, fundamental elements of compassion that are so critical to being able to, I think, be a good leader. If you think about all of the great leaders in the world, Abraham Lincoln, he wasn't a born leader. I think it developed over time. He led with his heart, he led with his mind, And then I think that in addition to compassion and humility is self-awareness. It's really recognizing, okay, what are my strengths? What am I good at? What do I think I excel? But what are those things that I don't? And then how do I develop those areas, or surround myself with people that can really help me mitigate, a lot of those weaknesses. And as I said, that's kind of what I strive for every day. It's that self-awareness, it's that humility, it's that demonstration of compassion. And you think about the last 18 months, compassion with where the world is, what our employees are going through on a daily basis. They're trying to meet customers' needs, and at the same time trying to care for their grandparents, their children, their spouses, trying to stay safe, and recognizing that this is a journey that, thank God, none of us have ever gone through before, and so it's being humble. It's having those conversations like you were referring to before with Tim about, okay, what should we be thinking about? And it's a constant recognition from a self-awareness perspective in terms of what we do well and what we don't well. So to me, those are things that I strive for every day. Every day is a school day, and we're learning every day, and we continually trying to improve ourselves to be better examples, better role models for all of those people that are going to be in the business far after I'm gone.
Well, as you know, our business community here in New England has such a strong technology focus, and is increasingly looking to digitally enabled services, the Internet of Things, smart manufacturing. we hear so much about the rollout of 5G. Can you help us understand the power of 5G and what it can mean for how we do business going forward?
Well, 5G is going to really change the way that we live. And by the way, the technologists are already talking about 6G. So, when you think back, when I first started in the wireless business, which was back in the kind of late 80s, we were all in analog-based technology. It was just kind of basic phone service, and not very good at that, right? A lot of drops, a lot of blocking. It was rare to be able to even have a call that lasted for the entire conversation, if you can remember back to that. And then we went digital. And so we went to the first kind of broad version was 2G. And this was basic messaging. So if you remember SMS, kind of texting, messaging back and forth, in addition to having a voice call. And then we went to 3G, and 3G became more of an email, a little bit more construct to it, a little more substance to it, more speed to it. Then we went to 4G, which was more entertainment. So, things like Spotify and, and all the music and really starting gaming really started. And again, it was just more speed. So each and every tech-based, it was faster, faster, and faster, and faster. And then comes along 5G. And 5G, which we're still in the early innings, in terms of deployment, our customers are creating a nationwide capability as we speak. Phones that you're buying, I just bought a set the other day. It's got a 5G chip in there. So, most of the phones that are now being sold in the stores and you're buying online from our customers have 5G capability, as well as still 4G. So you're going to be able to use the phone on old technologies and take advantage of the new technologies as it continues to build out. In the United States, our customers will probably spend $35 billion just this year on deploying new 5G technology. And that's the way technologies get deployed. They first come out and they're on first a geographic. Boston's usually one of the early places where we see new technology. And then it goes out on a nationwide basis so that we're all able to take advantage of it. And then all of the developers outside of the wireless carriers start to write applications to take advantage of the new benefits of 5G. And that's really when we start to see the differences, the benefits and trying new applications and new stuff. And what 5G does, it brings a lot more speed. It's whether 10 times more speed that we're currently used to. And so that's the normal evolution. But what 5G also brings to us is what we call a lot lower latency. So when you think about what latency is, that's when we hit the send key and how quickly we're able to get a response. And what's happened now with 5G is that latency has reduced significantly. And so as a result, we're able to have even more benefits kind of at the local edge. Probably the best example is to think about autonomous vehicles. Okay, when you think about if you're in a vehicle and you're not driving, right? You're looking at some movie or doing something, and it's purely autonomous. It needs to be a pretty low latency such that you don't hit the car in front of you, or you're stopping at that red light, or you're staying in your lane. You need that constant communication to be able to ensure the safety of an autonomous vehicle. And prior technologies didn't allow for that kind of safety. So that's just one kind of extreme example, if you will. But when you kind of step back, Jim, and you start to think about this digital transformation that's going on, at least I think the way we're seeing that is that this digital transformation, the connections that have to occur among all of these technologies, it's going to be cloud-based. You're looking, even at your phone today, all of your things are really in the cloud. you will. They're not really residing on the phone itself. Pictures, messages, all these things are up in the cloud. And we believe much of the data that's utilized over the next several years is going to be cloud-based. It needs to be interconnected. So all of these sites that we have behind us, the data centers, all of the data needs to be interconnected on a global basis, and it needs to be very distributed. Because what we're finding is that to the extent that we're able to take advantage of all of the benefits of 5G, that computing capability is moving out closer to the customer, maybe even on the premise, but definitely moving out closer to the customer. And that's what we call the edge. And so we take a look at our 220,000 sites that we currently have today. They're pretty much out at the edge. And so when we start to think about the opportunities for digital transformation and even our business, we think that we're pretty well positioned to be able to take advantage of that edge that continues to move out closer and closer to the customer. So technology is really evolving the numbers of applications and the number of uses that I think we're going to really start to see over the next 3 to 5 years. We really are at just the onset of the deployment of 5G. I mean, keep in mind, 4G really started to be deployed kind of at the end of 2008, end of the first decade, right? And so I would expect 4G to be with us for another 10 years. But so technologies will last for 10 to 20 years, and then 5G will really start to take over. So, we'll hear more and more about 5G, not necessarily from just a pure technology, but more in terms of the types of applications it's going to have on our daily lives. So it is really an exciting period of time.
Absolutely. It's tremendously exciting. Is digital transformation a big part of your focus, or are there other issues?
No, I mean, digital transformation absolutely is fundamental to our strategy. We are a very local business. We're in 23 markets, 220,000 sites. We manage the land and the real estate out at those locations. We're dealing with local customers. But as we start to think about the way the transformation I believe is going to really start to evolve, that distributed part of the formula is really core to what we do. So we are in 23 countries. We have 220,000 sites today. I believe we'll be adding significantly more sites over the next 2 to 3 years to that portfolio. And so I think we're in an interesting sweet spot, if you will, particularly for the large hyperscalers like the Amazons, the Azures, to be able to look at the world on a global basis and to be able to then identify American Tower as having a global value proposition. So not only are we in the local market meeting local customers' needs, local consumer needs in that market, providing a passive infrastructure, I'm hopeful that we'll be core to the global company's strategy to be able to evolve their own value propositions that they're offering to their customers. So it is very much a part of our strategy going forward. It's not going to happen overnight. 5G is going to take a while. And by the way, while 5G is being deployed in the United States, there are not a lot of markets outside of the United States that are experiencing 5G. We still have many markets outside of the United States that are still back in the 3G world. And that was the reason that we really launched into those markets, that we would be able to take advantage of the technology cycles in those markets to be able to enjoy the growth. So the sites look the same, the relationships with the customers look the same, but the technology that's being deployed in many of our international markets is sometimes one or two versions behind. So we're able to learn a lot from, for example, the United States. Germany is now in 5G deployment. So, there are certain markets that are deploying 5G, but most are not. And so this is a journey. It's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight, but we're really trying to position ourselves to be able to take advantage of what that digital world is going to look like in 5 to 10 years.
Right. You're also working to tackle the digital divide globally through your Digital Communities Initiative. Can you just describe this program for our audience?
Yeah, no, we're really proud of what we've branded Digital Communities. We've received some global recognition on this initiative, and as I said, it's core to what we call the Edison Alliance within the World Economic Forum, and so we think it's going to be a key part of the puzzle to really be able to impact this digital divide that I was referring to before. Mm-hmm. But when you step back and you think about a cellular telephone tower, at each one of our towers, we've got an internet connection, and we've got power, and we've got security. And so the opportunity that we found, and we've largely deployed these, we only have a couple hundred of them, by the way, but we've deployed them in Africa as well as in India, is that when you bring a facility in to a village or a series of villages, oftentimes it's electricity for the very first time they've even had. So in many cases, these villages have not even had electricity, right? And so all of a sudden, we're now putting the power of not just electricity, but also the power of the internet right in their very hands. And so we're able, and particularly interestingly enough, during the pandemic, telehealth. People in the villages can't get to hospitals, they can't get to doctors. And so we've really been able to bring health services in a telehealth format to villages. We've been able to bring education. So in many of our digital communities, we'll bring in the cell site, which has the power, which has the internet connection. We have schools that are actually being built near the tower that connect, such that kids, adults in those villages can actually now receive educational services that they were never able to receive before. And then telecommerce. And a perfect example was an example of a village in Colombia, I remember the secretary, the regulator in the market, talking about a village where the family made grew onions, and were in poverty. They worked 24 hours a day in poverty, onions, because all they had the ability to sell them to were other people in the village. And so by bringing in an internet connection, she was now able to sell those onions to other villages, to other areas, to other countries. And all of the jobs then, from a supply chain perspective, that actually enabled. And it turned the village into a thriving community. And so we have 200 or so of these digital communities, largely, as I said, in Africa as well as in India. We need 20,000, Jim. We don't need two. We have plans to get to 2,000. And so we've got that funded plans, but we need partners. We need help. As you would imagine, there are a lot of things that we need at the street level, right? We need a lot of feet on the street to help train, to help educate, to build those communities. We can bring the facilities in, we can build the tower, we can bring the internet connection in and the power, but we need a lot of people at the street level to be able to enable us. And so we're hoping that the World Economic Forum will give us that platform to be able to really garner more partners, attract more partners from a funding standpoint, as well as from just a physical presence perspective, to really help us conquer this incredible divide that, as I said, was clearly underscored with the pandemic that we're going through.
What a terrific program. I mean,
it is awesome. I'm really proud.
Yeah. You should be. You should be proud.
Really proud of my people. This was really developed for our teams in Africa and India who saw the need. They scraped together the money to be able to start to put it together. And now we have the governance, we've got the process in place to, I think, really start to have some meaningful impact on creating connectivity for those that currently don't have it. And so we're really excited about it.
Well, I mean, the two things that jump out at me on this terrific program is poverty. You can address poverty and you can address unemployment.
Right.
I mean, that's a win-win because as you talk about the inequity, those are the two areas. that need to-
Absolutely.
and this is a terrific program in addressing it. So congratulations. Well
No,
done.
no, thanks, Jim. And as I said, there, even in the New England area, there's so much capability and so much talent. And we're hopeful that, we're able to even create some meaningful partnerships in the New England area to really be able
Well,
to take this to the next
What
level.
I was
We need-
wondering, is there a way of bringing that model here to the United States and in particular to New England? Do you need any support here from us?
Well, we do, the infrastructure bill that is in the midst is I think going to be addressing that. I mean, as part of that bill, talking about $60 billion for broadband deployment. And this is a lot of the rural areas of the country that don't have connectivity or have connectivity that's really weak, We've got, examples, even in the New England area, working with a company or with an organization right now that has a very real need. So this is not just an issue in Africa. This is not just
Right.
an issue in
Right.
this is an issue right here and in home. And by the way, we've all experienced it. I think even working from homes and just in terms of connectivity and our customers are feverishly trying to improve that overall quality of signal. But we still have a way to go. And the more we're working from home and utilizing more of these broadband types of applications out of the office, i.e. not wired, it's going to continue to need a lot of work. And as I said, there are major opportunities, I think, to look at home right here in the United States to ensure that everyone has that same level of signal coast to coast.
I mean, you mentioned the infrastructure bill and the $60 billion that's in there for the broadband. What else are you looking at that as the debate, unfolds here in Congress?
Well, I think what was helpful and our people, I think, were instrumental in terms of working with others to help drive this was that it's not just a wired connection, it's also wireless. And so, with 5G and ultimately 6G, we're going to have speeds to be able to provide a really high quality broadband connection in your home where you're not going to have to be wired. And so one of the key elements of the bill was to make sure that it was broad enough to not just deploy a wired solution, which is very expensive in and of its own right, but also to be able to be broad enough to include a wireless solution. And so that's where we come in. We're able to provide that kind of a wireless solution supporting our customers in those rural areas around the country. And so there was a lot of debate on, and a lot of it was education. I think with regulators, and they've been really, really easy for me to say, but really good to work with and easy to work with in terms of trying to understand, including those congressmen that exist right here in the New England area. They've been very supportive and very engaged. And I think it's really evolved into something that's going to be very fruitful and very beneficial to U.S. citizens.
Mm-hmm. Another major issue here in New England is that climate change and environmental sustainability. You touched on that briefly earlier, but I was hoping you could expand on some of the sustainability efforts in motion at the company and perhaps reflect on your own experience dealing with the complexities of doing so across the wide range of emerging economies where you operate.
Well, fundamental to our business is that we're a neutral host. And so I like to remind people that as a result of our infrastructure, we're able to take care for 4 or 5 different customers' needs, as opposed to each one of them building their own sites, right? And so we're a neutral host, and so we're able to mitigate the amount of carbon footprint that would have otherwise been created had we not been there. So that's kind of one element that I constantly try to remind people. But clearly power is a critical component at our sites. And while we're able to really offset a lot of that carbon footprint in the United States. We don't offset a lot of that yet outside of the United States. I mean, the grids in Africa and Asia are, quite poor, candidly, from an electricity perspective. And we have diesel generators at many of those locations outside of the United States, particularly in Africa and India. And they're running 90% of the time. And so there's constantly refueling and utilization of that fuel that needs to happen for us to be able to continually provide that broadband connection for our customers. And so our focus has been, okay, how do we reduce that carbon footprint? And through lithium ion, through solar, through even now wind, we're looking at ways of really being able to significantly reduce the use of diesel fuel on a sustainable going forward basis. And we've had a lot of success. We've invested a couple $100 million even in Africa on figuring out ways of really reducing our overall carbon footprint. And we've had great success. Even over the last couple of years, we've probably taken our carbon footprint down in half. And I think we're really just still touching the surface in terms of use of solar as well as use of wind to be able to provide that kind of clean energy at the local site level. And I'm hopeful that a lot of those types of solutions can then also be brought back here to the United States. So it's not just learnings from the United States that go international. There are an awful lot of learnings international that come back into the United States. And power and fuel is clearly one of those. And so that's what we do. That's kind of core to our business. And so we've really embraced that opportunity and embraced that challenge. And I think there are a lot of very interesting things that we can be doing and will be doing going forward. By the way, we are partnering with certain institutions, even in Boston, educational facilities that are helping us think through, how we can continually look at reducing that overall carbon footprint going forward. And so we have a group that's dedicated at looking at that and embracing that and really making some real headway on further reducing that overall diesel consumption and really ensuring that we're using a lot more clean energy going forward than we have in the past.
Yeah. You mentioned racial inequities and how access to technology can expand opportunities for individuals and small businesses. But I know that many large employers are now looking internally at diversity within their own workforce. Can you just tell us about some of the steps that American Tower is taking to foster diversity and inclusion with your workforce?
Well, this is not just a U.S. issue, right? This is a global issue. And so that adds even more complexity. It may not be race, but it could be gender. Interestingly enough, in one of those early listening sessions that I had, spoke to a woman who said, who's Kenyan. She goes, I didn't even know what the word race really meant until I got off the plane at Logan Airport. And so the issues are so different, Jim, as you can imagine, in each of the markets that we're servicing. My personal journey within American Tower really started, as I mentioned before, 18 months ago, in a very fruitful way in terms of, again, listening, trying to understand where are we from an equity perspective? Where are we from a representation perspective? Who are we recruiting? How are we helping people within the company once they develop? Who's on my leadership team? What kind of experiences am I able to create as a result of having diverse thought and diverse ways of thought? And so through those listening sessions have really now been able to develop a broad strategy. I brought in just a wonderful woman who's now running with me our overall DE&I initiatives within the business. And it really does, it's blocking and tackling. It really comes down to, okay, where are you recruiting from? And once the individuals are on board, once you have a diverse plate of individuals in the business, how are we ensuring that we're developing each and every one of them how do we make sure that it's performance driven? And how do we continue to grow it? It's not going to happen overnight. How do we ensure that we have equity around the business and around for each employee? So what are we doing even from looking at compensation and programs to ensure that everyone is in fact treated equally? That's kind of at the core. How do we ensure that there's no racism within the business? We don't tolerate racism. Full stop. If we see that person clearly doesn't adhere to the values that we've got within the business, that person has no right being within our business. And so there's some fundamental initiatives there to ensure that racism just doesn't exist. And by the way, it does. And by the way, I'd argue that it exists in every business, to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. So if people are in the sand thinking that there's no racism in their business, shame on them, because it does. And so it is a journey. As I said, it's a global journey that we need to embark on. The journey is different in each of the markets. And it's something that the CEO has to own. This is not something that can be delegated. That's not part of the leadership style that I talked about before. The CEO's got to own it. And they have to be personally committed to making sure that it's good for the business and it's just the right thing to do. And so the CEO, the leadership team, every employee in the business needs to embrace it and be engaged in it and own it. And that sounds simple sometimes, but it's not so simple. And it just takes, the daily management of that entire effort. So it's a journey. There's no single element that's going to cure it or fix it. It's a series of initiatives and opportunities, and I think some of those will work better than others. But it starts with communications. It starts with a strategy. It starts with the leadership behind it, and that's where we are. As I said, it's not going to happen overnight. It is a journey, and one that we just need to make a difference in.
Mm-hmm. Well, you are making a difference, and you're making a positive difference. And with that, we're coming up on the end of our time. The hour went by quickly. I just want to thank you, Tom, I really found it to be so informative and so enlightening. And I know I speak for so many people in the audience that they're going to have a different perspective as they drive by and look at a cell. They're going to know something behind that cell tower, and that's the American. Right. I mean, right. I think this has been a wonderful conversation, and I really appreciate you giving the time and giving your thoughts. And again, I just found it enlightening. So I thank you. You are our first guest. No pressure, but you wasted it. You wasted it. You've
great, Jeff. Thank you.
You've elevated the bar for future speakers, but I just want to say thank you. I think it's also safe to say that American Tower is truly in good hands under your leadership. And as we wrap up, again, I thank you, Tom, for taking the time to join us today. I also want to just say thank you to one of your team members, Becca Gould, and her extraordinary team at American Tower for their assistance to making this program possible today, as well as Emily Isaac of our council. Becca, as you know, is on our board, the new council, and she has been such an engaged member. She reflects so well on your company. I refer to her as the ambassador for the New England Council because she's always promoting the good work of the council. So I want to give her a special recognition. I hope all of you enjoyed today's program, and I hope you'll join us for our next one. Our next one and the inside the Connor office will take place on October 1st. Our guest will be Vada Khan, the president of National Grid US. As always, you can find more information on our website. And I thank all of you again for joining us this morning, and have a great day.
Great, Jim. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.